The night Shin Tae-jun finally came back for me, I was already standing in the private library of the man who had quietly replaced him, one hand resting on the curve of my pregnant belly, the other being held by fingers heavier with rings than his had ever been. He laughed the day his mother told the driver to leave me on the curb in the rain, and that laugh is the sound that built every wall, every door, every armored car that surrounds me now. He did not know, on that wet pavement 3 years ago, that his oldest rival was sitting in a black sedan across the street, watching the entire scene, memorizing the exact angle at which I fell. Let me tell you how we got there. My name is Naomi James. I was 26 years old, 6 weeks pregnant, and working the night shift in a small bakery 2 blocks from Insadong. When I first met the man my grandmother would have called a beautiful disaster. I had come to Seoul on a culinary scholarship 4 years earlier, the only black girl in a class of 38, and I had stayed because the city felt like a place where a quiet woman could become invisible in a useful way. I baked bread before sunrise. I walked home in the dark. I sent money back to my mother in Houston every second Friday. That was the entire shape of my life. Shin Tae-jun walked into my bakery on a Tuesday in November in a black coat that cost more than my rent, and he ordered a single milk bun and stayed for 2 hours watching me work. He did not flirt. He simply was. He came back the next Tuesday and the Tuesday after that, and by the 4th Tuesday, he was waiting at the back door with an umbrella because the forecast had said rain. The blood dragon of Chongryang, head of the Shin Syndicate, the heir who had buried 2 uncles to wear his father's ring, was opening an umbrella over a tired baker with flour in her hair. I should have known then. A man like that does not learn to be gentle. He learns to be patient. For 9 months, he was the warmest secret of my life. He kept me in a small apartment in Hanam-dong, with a view of the river and a kitchen I never used because he insisted on cooking for me himself, badly, every Sunday. He told me his mother was traditional. He told me his family was complicated. He told me that when the time was right, he would walk me through the front gate of the Shin estate with my name on his mouth like a vow. I believed him. I believed him the way a woman believes a man who has memorized the way she takes her tea. I told him about the baby on a Thursday. He went very still, and then he smiled, and then he kissed my forehead and said, "Stay here, I will handle it." I waited 3 days. On the 4th day, the door opened, and it was not Tae-jun who walked through it. It was Madame Shin Bok-woo, his mother, in a cream coat trimmed with sable, flanked by 2 men in black who did not look at me the way men look at women. They looked at me the way men look at furniture that needs to be moved. She sat down at my kitchen table without being invited. She did not take off her gloves. She placed a thick white envelope between us and slid it forward with 1 fingernail. "There is enough in there to disappear nicely," she said. "There is enough in there to raise it, if you must, somewhere my son will never see it. There is enough in there to forget his name." I did not touch the envelope. I told her, in the careful Korean I had spent 4 years learning, that I loved her son and that I was not for sale. She tilted her head. She studied me the way a jeweler studies a stone that has turned out to be glass. "A girl like you," she said, very softly, very kindly, the way you would speak to a small, confused animal. "A girl like you really thought you were going to be a Shin." And then she stood up, and she walked to the door. And on her way out, she said one more thing to the men in black. "Take her things, put her on the street. Do it now, while it is still raining. He needs to see what he was playing with." They were efficient. They were not cruel with their hands, only with the speed of it. My suitcase was thrown onto the curb. My coat was thrown after it. My phone, which had Tae-jun's number in it, was crushed under a heel I did not see. And then they left, and I was sitting on a wet sidewalk in Hanamdong in November, with a child inside me, and rain in my hair, and a single white envelope I had refused to open, lying in the gutter like a leaf. Taejun came. That is the part I have never told anyone. He came 20 minutes later in his black car, and he rolled the window down, and he looked at me, sitting on my suitcase in the rain, and he laughed. Not loud, not joyful, worse than both. It was the laugh of a man who has just been handed proof that his mother was right, and that his life would be simpler now. It was the laugh of a man choosing his name over mine. He rolled the window back up. The car drove away. Across the street, in a different black car, another man had been watching the entire time. I did not see him get out. I only felt the rain stop hitting my shoulders and looked up and saw a tall figure holding a black umbrella over me without saying a word. He did not introduce himself. He did not ask me what had happened. He simply crouched down on the wet pavement so that his face was level with mine, and he said, very quietly in English, "There is a car. There is a warm house. There is an old woman who will be angry with both of us if you sit here any longer. Will you come?" It was not a question. It was a door being opened. His name was Kwon Dae-oh. He was the heir of the Eastern Syndicate, the cold prince of Gangnam, the man whose territory had pressed against Shin Tae-jun's for 15 years, without a single bullet being fired, because both fathers had agreed long ago that war was bad for business. He was Tae-jun's oldest rival. He was also, I would learn later, the man Tae-jun had been most afraid of since they were boys at the same boarding school in Daegu, because Dae-oh had always been quieter, and quieter men remember longer. The car ride was 9 minutes. He did not speak. He passed me a folded handkerchief that smelled faintly of cedar. He turned the heat up without asking. When I started to cry, silently, with my face turned to the window, he did not look. He simply reached across the seat and placed his coat over my knees. That was the first kindness I had received in 72 hours, and it broke me open more thoroughly than anything Madam Shin had said. The house was in the hills above the city, hidden behind a wall of pine. He led me through a courtyard, through a low wooden door, into a kitchen lit by a single lamp, where an old woman was already standing at the counter, stirring a pot of rice porridge, as though she had been told to expect me hours ago. "This is Mama Yoon," he said, "my grandmother. She runs this house. She runs me. She will run you, too, if you let her." Mama Yoon did not look up from her pot. She pointed at a stool. "Sit." She ladled porridge into a bowl with ginger and scallion floating on top. She set it down in front of me with a spoon. "Eat. You already decided to trust us on that pavement, child. Eat." I ate. I do not remember finishing. I remember waking the next morning in a guest room I did not recognize, with a blanket tucked around me that I had not pulled up, and a glass of water by my hand that I had not poured. That is how I came to live, very quietly, in the house of the man my child's father feared. The first month, I did not speak much. I slept. I ate Mama Yoon's porridge at 9 in the morning and her short rib stew at 7 in the evening. I walked the garden in the afternoons, where the camellias were just beginning to bud, and I felt the baby move for the first time on a Wednesday, alone, under a persimmon tree. And I did not cry because there was no one I could have told who would have understood. Kwon Dae-oh did not push. He simply was. He left for the office before I woke. He came home after I had gone to bed. On the weekends, he sat in the library with the door open, reading contracts in 3 languages, and he never once asked me to come in, which is why, on the 4th Saturday, I did. He looked up. He did not smile. He simply moved the second armchair closer to the lamp without saying a word, and I sat down across from him, and we read in the same silence for 2 hours. And when I stood up to leave, he said, "Tomorrow, at this time, if you want." It was the closest thing to a courtship I had ever experienced, and it was conducted entirely in the language of furniture being moved. The microbeats began to accumulate. He set the table on the nights Mama Yoon was tired, without being asked. I learned, by the third week, how he took his coffee, and I made it that way one morning before either of us had spoken, and he looked at the cup for a long moment before he picked it up, and I understood that I had done something to him that words could not have done. He moved the kettle off the heat before it whistled because I was sleeping. He took my coat from my shoulders one evening before I had realized I was cold. He sat down on the kitchen floor beside me one night when I could not stop crying, his back against the cabinet too, and he did not touch me, and he did not speak, and that was the exact shape of the comfort I needed. In the 5th month of my pregnancy, I overheard him on the phone in the hallway outside the library. He did not know the door was open. He was speaking to someone whose name I did not catch, in the low, even tone he used for business, and I heard him say it as plainly as if he were ordering a car. "She is under this roof. That means she is under my protection. Her word is my word. Her safety is your only priority. Her displeasure is mine. Anyone who moves against her moves against me. Make sure Shin understands. Make sure his mother understands twice." I stood in the hallway with my hand on the wall, and I felt the baby kick hard, as if she had heard him too. Mama Yoon found me there. She did not pretend she had not seen my face. "He is slow," she said. "He has always been slow, but he is not stupid. He will see, and when he sees, he will not unsee." She patted my cheek with a hand that smelled of garlic and ginger. "You are carrying my great-grandchild. You will sit. You will breathe. The world can wait." The world did not wait long. The Shin Group held its annual charity gala in the 8th month of my pregnancy, in the gold ballroom of a hotel in Junggu, under a chandelier the size of a small car. Every photograph of Seoul society for the next month would be taken in that room. Shin Tae-jun would be there, on the arm of the woman his mother had selected for him in March, a thin, pale heiress with a name like a porcelain figurine. Madam Shin Bok-wui would be there, in cream and gold, accepting an award for her foundation's work with unwed mothers, which is the kind of joke only the very rich can afford to tell in public. Kwon Deo came into the library on the morning of the gala and set a long, flat box on the reading table. "You do not have to," he said, "but the invitation has my name on it, and the second seat is empty, and the city is going to find out about us eventually. I would rather it be tonight, on our terms, with you in something that fits." I opened the box. It was a cream and gold gown, cut to accommodate the 8th month of a pregnancy, with a high collar and long sleeves, modest in every way that mattered, and devastating in every way that did not. There were no jewels in the box, just the dress, and a small note in his handwriting that said only, "If you wear it, I will know your answer." I wore it. We arrived late, on purpose. The ballroom was already full when the doors opened and the announcer read his name. And then, after a pause, "That was not an accident. Mine. Kwon Deo, heir of the Eastern Syndicate, and Miss Naomi James." The room turned. The room did not breathe. He walked me in slowly because I was 8 months pregnant, and because slowness was the point, his hand resting in the small of my back, his thumb moving once across the silk in a private signal that meant, "I am here, I am here, I am here." Madam Shin Bok-wui saw me first. She was holding a champagne flute. She did not drop it. She simply stopped speaking mid-sentence to the ambassador's wife, and her mouth made a small shape that was almost a word and then was not. She did not react. No recognition, no hesitation, nothing. And that nothing was the loudest sound in the room. Shin Tae-jun saw me second. He was standing near the stage with his porcelain fiancé's hand on his sleeve, and when his eyes found me, his face did something I had waited 3 years to see. It collapsed inward, very slightly, around the mouth, the way a building collapses around a fire before anyone outside has seen the smoke. He made a sound. Not the cruel, relieved laugh from the rainy curb in Hanam-dong. The opposite of it. The sound of a man understanding, in 1 second, exactly what he had thrown away and exactly who had picked it up. Daeo's hand moved from the small of my back to the curve of my belly. He did it in front of every camera in the room. He did not look at Tae-jun. He looked at me. "Breathe," he said, very softly, only for me. "We are almost through." Madam Shin recovered first, as women like her always do. She crossed the room with her cream-gloved hand extended as though she had been planning to greet us all evening. "Miss James," she said sweetly, "what a surprise. What a condition." I did not flinch. I smiled the way Mama Yoon had taught me to smile at people who were already losing. "Madam Shin," I said, "what a coincidence. Your foundation's work with unwed mothers has been such an inspiration to me." The ambassador's wife laughed before she could stop herself. Madam Shin's face did not move, but something behind her eyes did, and I watched her understand that the room had heard me, and that the room had chosen. Daeo stepped forward. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "For the avoidance of confusion," he said, to Madam Shin, to Tae-jun, to the cameras, to the city. "Miss James is the mother of my child, and the woman I intend to marry. Anyone who moves against her moves against me. Anyone who has moved against her in the past will be considered to have moved against me then. I trust the families in this room will adjust their calendars accordingly." The silence that followed was not the silence of shock. It was the silence of 100 powerful people recalculating in real time which side of a wall they had been standing on. Madam Shin set her champagne flute down on a passing tray with a hand that was not quite steady. Shin Tae-jun did not move at all. He simply accepted it, the way a man accepts a verdict he has already been served in his own mind. We left before dessert. In the car, Daeo did not speak for a long time. Then he reached across the seat and took my hand and placed it, with his on top of it, on my belly. And he said, "Marry me on Saturday. Mama Yoon has been planning it since November. She will be insufferable if you say no." I said yes in the language of furniture being moved. I leaned my head on his shoulder, and I did not lift it again until we were home. Our daughter was born 3 weeks later in a private wing of a hospital in Seongbuk-dong at 4 in the morning, with Daeo's tattooed hand resting on the curve of my belly until the very last push, and Mama Yoon shouting instructions at the nursing staff in a Korean so old half of them did not understand it. When they placed her on my chest, Daeo did something I had never seen him do. He cried, silently. 1 tear, then another, then a third, and then he wiped his face with the back of his wrist and bent down and pressed his forehead to our daughter's forehead and said, in a voice so low I almost missed it, "Mine now, mine to keep." Mama Yoon stood at the foot of the bed with her arms folded. She turned to the head nurse. "I knew from the morning she made the porridge," she said, as though concluding an argument that had been running for 9 months. "I told you. I told all of you. Write it down. Here is what I know now that I did not know when I was sitting on a wet curb in Hanam-dong with a crushed phone and a refused envelope in the gutter. Love does not arrive loudly. It arrives the way a coat is laid across your knees in a moving car. The men who laugh when you are at your lowest are not powerful. They are only relieved, and a relief like that is the cheapest emotion a human being can feel. The men who watch quietly from across the street, who remember the angle at which you fell, who learn how you take your coffee before they learn how to say your name. Those are the men who build empires you can actually live inside. I did not lose Shin Tae-jun on that rainy night in November. I arrived, finally, at a home with a low wooden door and a pot of porridge already on the stove. My name is Naomi James. They threw me out pregnant in the rain and called it management. But I walked into the gold ballroom of the Shin Group on the arm of the man Shin Tae-jun had feared since he was a boy, and I walked into the empire that chose me. If you made it to the end of this story with me, stay close. Subscribe, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place, because part 2 is coming, and nothing will be the same.